Living my bucolic life, we have big city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some sing, and move the horses into the barn, and time to move them out again. Red barns, green pastures, beautiful park houses. The view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.
Welcome to Wet Hair Week. I've had time management issues this week, and so, you know, we do what we can do, so as the project progresses, my hair will get drier. But I'm going to be doing a project, and where is it? I think this is my pattern envelope here. Here it is. It is going to be this one with the little shorter length cape that goes over it. It said fast and easy, and on a week when I am having time management issues, fast and easy sounds fabulous. So I bought this knit at Joann's the other day. It is a nice stretch knit, very soft. I have pre-washed it, not because I think it's going to shrink, but because it's that black color, and if there's any residual dye that's going to come off, I want it to come off before I sew it. So it's pre-washed, pre-dried. And I actually cut this out already because I needed to, time management issues, but there's only 4 pieces to this dress. Look. Here we go. We have one big front, one big back, and then your assortment of cape options. And I'm doing this shorter one here. So just 4 pieces. It's a knit dress. No facings. Should be super quick. This could be the real walk-away dress instead of that other one with all the bias tape and everything. So now I can tell you, when I was looking at the pattern, and on the pattern itself, it has on the tissue paper what the different finished width measurements is, because it doesn't really say on the envelope here. I could tell that there wasn't very much ease built into this. This is meant to be somewhat of a figure, what's the word? Not bodycon, because it's not super stretched, but just barely skimming. And just my comfort level, I would rather have a little bit of ease in there, because I don't want every little tuck and bump to be translated into the knit dress that I'm wearing. So because of that, I'm actually cutting the entire dress out one size larger. It's just going to give me an extra couple inches of ease, and I think that that's going to give me just enough that I can feel comfortable wearing it without worrying about panty lines and things like that coming through. So that's my little TMI moment. So anyhow, this is knit. I haven't sewed knit for a while, so this is going to be fun. I'm going to throw a few techniques in there. Let me get started. Okay, so the first part that we need to work with are the little capelet parts. Now there's a front and a back. The front has a lower neckline than the back. They are both cut on a curve. I am not going to be clipping these notches because I think it's going to be pretty self-explanatory, and as a stretch knit I'm going to be being able to form it as I go anyway. So again, we are going for quick and easy here. So what it said in the instructions is that every stitch is going to be double stitched. So there'll be 2 rows of stitching for every seam, and they're indicating that as you sew it, you stretch as you sew. You know, good old stretch and sew. Don't we have fond memories of stretch and sew? So anyhow, that is the technique that I'm going to be using, following their instructions here. So I'm going to be matching up the side seams here of the front to the back. If if I can get it to lay. This is very soft knit. It's actually really pretty. So the first seam is going to be at 5/8 of an inch. To me, it looks like it's about 1/4 inch, but you can kind of see here the 2 rows of stitching. That's what we're going for here. And they're specifying, and it's a good idea to do the same on both sides. So whenever you're doing something, that you're going to stitch from the bottom to the top. Okay, so that you have that direction stitching. So let me go ahead, get over to my machine, the first row at 5/8. So as I'm stitching it, I'm going to be slightly stretching it both in front of the needle and behind the needle as I go. Okay, so I'm over here working on Yolanda today, and we are going to start this down here at the bottom. And if you have a serger and you love to use your serger and you have a 4-thread serger, so it has, in addition to the overcast and the regular needle, a secondary needle out here, you can use that. That's fine. I'm going with their method because I have this thing about proving that you can sew stretch knits without a serger. So, you know, I do have one. I do love mine for its purposes, but this is what we're going to do here today. So what I'm going to do is get started just a couple stitches, back stitch it to lock it in, and get forward enough that I can get a grasp on things. Okay, this is just marking my 5/8 of an inch position. It's just one of these little magnetic dealies because there's no grid on here. So as I'm sewing, I'm going to be pulling both from the front and the back. You can see I'm not like really, you know, stretching it out of proportion, but enough that a reasonable amount of stretch is worked in. Okay, and then take out that pin, give it a little tug, and go to the next. Okay, so let me do this. Now it's going to, as you're sewing it, it's going to look a little bit bumpy. That will come out when you press it, so don't get freaked out about that right now. But you can see at this point I am able to put some stretch onto this, and it's just a cape. It's not going to be under pressure and everything, and it's going to be fine. So let me finish up this first seam. Did put a brand new ballpoint needle in here before I got started. It's a size 9 ballpoint because that's all I have, and I'm having a little bit of a stress issue because the black thread that I have, it's an all-purpose thread, but the eye of a size 9 needle is very small, you know, as it should be. It's a small needle. So what works best in a size 9 needle is actually a thread that's slightly finer than this is. But this is all I have, so we're working with it. Basically, when I go to release and I, you know, lift my presser foot and I pull out, I'm trying to be very gentle as I pull so I don't get any snags or anything going on there. So anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and get started with my second row of stitching. Again, I'm just going to lock it in and I'm putting it about 1/4 of an inch in, and I am going to stretch for this second row of stitching also. Okay. So I'm going to keep going all the way up. So over here at my ironing board, I don't know if you can see it, but I can feel that it's a little bit bumpy. So I am going to press it. And that's just going to get all of the fabric between each little stitch just to calm itself down and realize that things are okay. And then it's going to feel so much better. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the look of all of this out here. So what I'm going to do is come back in and decently close to the second row of stitching, I'm just going to trim that outside edge off. Okay, so they're going to want us to hem the bottom edge of this first. But before I do that, I am going to press my seam allowances towards the back. And I can tell the back one because it has a shallower neckline here. It's a very soft knit. Okay, so that it's going to want to lay in the right direction before I get started hemming it. Okay, so of course, if you used a serger for this, and there's nothing wrong with that, you know, you would have sewn it the second time, and trimmed off the edge all in one swoop. So it will work the same. It will work the same. So we need to put a narrow hem around the bottom edge. What they want you to do is run a row of stitching 1/4 inch in, so that then when you, because it's a slight curve, so that then when you go to turn it under, you can use that little stitching line to tighten it up to get a curve. I'm not going to, and the reason is because this is a very, very gradual curve, and this is a knit, okay? So I'm going to use the benefit of the stretch that's built into it. I'm going to cut a little diagonal off that seam allowance down there to make my life easier. I'm really not liking the idea of a rolled hem on this. Okay, I'm going to do something different, you know. You can make a rolled hem if you like. First thing I'm going to do is down here in this seam allowance, I'm going to trim it out about 3/4 of an inch, just because that's an excessive amount of thickness there. Then I'm going to go get my stitch witchery. Okay, I got a big roll of, this is like 1/2 inch wide, fusible bond stitch witchery stuff, okay? And what I'm going to do is lay it at, so that the edge of my stitch witchery is at about that 5/8 inch position. Fold my fabric up and press it, okay? Now, this stuff will stretch after you sew it on, or after you iron it on. It will continue to stretch. Basically, I'm using it as pins right now. This is not going to be the finished hem. But I'm going to do this all the way around, so I have a very flat edge here. I think that if I had a rolled edge, it would be a little bit bulky, and I want this to drape easy, you know? So I think that having it just folded up once will be fine. It's not going to fray at all, so you don't have to worry about that. So let me finish doing that all the way around. Okay, so at this point, it's fused up. What I love about this technique is you get a really, really nice sharp edge on your hem on a knit. There's no, you know, sliding off center and everything, and it's perfect. So what I can do is, now with this fused, I'm going to go back to my sewing machine, and I am going to make a row of stitching. I'm just going to do it at about a 1/2 inch. That should be plenty, you know, to work in the edge here, and just call that good. I can still stretch it, because this bond, it melts, so it's working with the individual threads at this point. So I can stretch it as I go, just like before, and I will be right back. I've got it sewn, as you can see, and just like before, I'm going to go ahead and iron it, just to relax everything in there and make it feel nice and smooth. All the way around the edge here. And this little cape is going to act as the facing for the dress, so that we can use this neckline up here for the facing, and we don't have any extra steps that way. So that's pretty cool. Let me go ahead and finish this, and I'll meet you on the other side. Okay, so the next little point they want you to do is start working on these dress pieces. This is my back, this is my front, and I got my back butted up next to it, because the instruction that they want you to do next is put ease stitching between the top, and this is the side seam here, from the top down to a dot that is indicated right here, okay? And I was just curious how much ease you're supposed to be working in, so I put the back piece up there to match it. What I'm going to do instead of ease stitching it is, one of my favorite stabilizers for knit is clear elastic. This is 5mm wide. can't remember where I bought this. I think I got it at 𝐥𝐤𝐤𝐞, maybe the Bias Bespoke website, I don't know. But it's just clear elastic. The cool thing about this is it's going to hold its size. I'll tell you what I'm having a struggle with here right now. When I was cutting this out, you know, I said I'm going to cut out a size larger. Well, I just realized that on my back piece, I actually cut out 2 sizes larger. And on my front piece, I cut out 1 size larger. So it's not going to be a big deal. But I was trying to decide, well, which dot am I going to be using? So what I'm going to do is just take the point where these little register marks, these double notches are, and put it up at the top here. And then you can see what the difference is, okay? So I'm going to cut 2 little pieces of this elastic that's going to go from, you know what, I'm going to clip the top register mark because I think that will be easier to see when I am over at the sewing machine. So I'm going to clip the top one there, the top notch, and the top notch over here, okay? And my elastic is going to go from the center of that notch right here to the top edge, all right? So I've got my finished size based on the back. The back piece is smaller than the front. Okay, so now I have 2 because, you know, I have 2 sides of my garment. I can put this aside for right now. I don't need it anymore for a while. And when I go to my sewing machine, I am going to sew this little piece of elastic at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Start it at the very top edge, stretch it so the bottom of the elastic is level with this little notch that I trimmed, and sew it on like that. And when it's done, I can release it and it's going to add that ease. I am going to sew this, I could do it with a straight stitch just like that, but I'm going to do it with a slight zigzag, you know, just because I think that the elastic will lay flatter with a zigzag on it. So let me go ahead and get those sewed on. Okay, so here's my little notch that I cut right there. Here's the end of my clear elastic, if you can see it. I'm just going to line that up parallel with my notch. I got my little gauge here at about a 1/2 inch seam allowance, so that way all my zigzag and everything will be inside the seam allowance when I make my final stitch. So I just gotta make sure everything is good. Take a couple stitches to get it started. Back one up. Okay, now I'm just going to go a little bit first without stretching too hard. Okay, now it's locked in. I'm going to take my end of my elastic, match it up with the edge of my fabric here. Okay, hold that with this hand and just stretch it down so that I'm working that extra in as I go. And then with this hand pulling behind. Okay, so now pull this out here. Hopefully you can see that that little zigzag worked in whatever ease was necessary. And now this is the right length to match up with the back side in the same location. If you want to do this and you don't have a big roll of this stuff, this is the same stuff in general that they use to make the little things that they put on garments so that it will stay on the hanger easily, okay? So if you have a garment with that on there that you're not using particularly, if you go and snip those off, you can use those and it'll work the same. Okay, so now that I've got my front together, what I need to do is go ahead and with the same technique that I did with my other one where I do 2 rows of stitching, I'm going to match up my side seams and my shoulder seams front to back, you know, pin them, sew them with the 2 rows of stitching all the way down. Just started to pin these together, and I've decided I'm going to do something slightly different because you've seen the technique on the cape for the way that they want you to do all of the stitching, okay? I want to use my serger as my secondary row of stitching on here. I don't want to use it as the primary. I like having a real lock stitch for my first row. The way I'm going to do this is I'm going to do one row on my regular sewing machine at 5/8 of an inch, working in the stretch as I go. Then I'm going to come back and serging both of the edges together after that, just serging and trimming off the edge all in one swipe, all the way down, both of these sides and the shoulders. I want you to see that the easing that elastic did made this fit on here perfectly, and when I'm stitching it, I'm going to be stitching just this side of all of this stuff, so this will be, you know, invisible. Okay, I want to show you my seams here. So especially up here at the top, I want you to try to see that I have my regular row stitching in. I do have my serging in white, okay? If I was using my serging thread for my main stitching thread, I would definitely have changed it to black. But one, I'm trying to do it fast and easy, and rethreading my serger right now does not fall in the fast category, and I'm working on another project at the same time which needs white thread, and we just don't want to go there. Since my black thread is the main one, that's the one that will be visible from the outside if anything does get a little bit stretched, so I'm okay. But what I wanted to show you is that you can see up here where that little bit of easing gets carried over and worked in, but from the outside, I can open this up here, you know, everything is nice. So what I'm going to do before I attach this to the cape is I'm going to go ahead and hem it. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. This is already a length that is good with me. If I just make another narrow hem, exactly like the cape, where I fold it up and press it with my stitch witchery. I'm going to actually do it at closer to like 3/4 of an inch down here. Get it pressed with my stitch witchery, and then come back at about, you know, a 5/8 inch seam allowance and just stitch it all the way around, but still incorporating the stretch into it as I go. To show you that before I actually put the hem up on the bottom, what I did is I trimmed out that little bit of seam allowance down there also, and I did run a row of serging around the bottom edge just to clean it up. You know, it makes it nice and level, and because this is going to be, you know, visible from the inside, I wanted to have a nice overcast edge there. Okay, so here is my bottom hem. I really, really love the way it turned out. So easy. So if you can see right there, here's my serging, and then I just put my row of stitching just directly underneath it, you know, stretched as I went, and then ironed it so everything would calm itself down and lay nice and flat, and that's great. Now this is a sleeveless top, and the instructions want us to make another narrow hem at the sleeves. And they keep talking about that little rolled hem thing, but you know what? I am going to continue my trends that I have going right now and do the exact same thing at the sleeves that I did down here. So the first thing I'm going to do is just serge around the outside edge, just because you can see it's a little bit jagged where I was cutting it, you know, that kind of happens. That'll even everything out. Fold it over and press it with my stitch witchery, and then stitch it. This hem here is probably about 3/4 of an inch. I'm probably going to make this one a little bit narrower, but it's going to be the same principle, and because it's a knit, it's going to flex and all will be well. Right, so at this point I have my dress inside out here. I've got my sleeves hemmed up, okay, loving this technique, and I am putting my little cape over it. I'm putting the wrong side of the cape out and the wrong side of the dress. So the right side of my cape is up against the wrong side of the dress, okay? And I am matching up the little shoulder seams here on each side. Let me just kind of shake this down for a second, and I'm going to take my time and put some pins around the rest of the neckline, getting it nice and even. Once I have this all matched up so that my edges are all even, I'm going to, once again, stitch this at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, stretching it as I go all the way around the neckline. Okay, so I stitched it, stretching as I go all the way around, and then I came back and serged around the edge just to clean it up. And it has been less than 2 hours from the time well, cutting it out not included because I did cut it out last night, but our dress is done. Our dress is done. So now I just take this little cape, turn my dress right side out, drape the little cape across the top here. Let me get all these little threads out. And that is it. The only thing that I can see is that I don't want this white edge of the cape to want to peek out. I'm going to pop it on my dress form just to see how it hangs. So looking at it up here, I'm not satisfied. I am seeing white and I don't want to see white up here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it off and do some understitching. So for understitching this, I have my seam allowance down here, and you put your understitching on the private side. I want this side here where my white, my wrong side of my fabric is, of my dress. This is my cape. I want that to disappear. Okay, so I'm going to run a row of understitching right along this edge on this side, making sure that my seam allowances are underneath my stitching. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run that all the way around the neckline. Okay, so my understitching is in, and if you can see when I hold it, it's going to want to pull the white down now. So from the outside, that should not be visible at all. And our dress is done. Okay, so it is done. This was the walk away dress. This is the cut it out in the morning and go to lunch in it dress. And I think it's pretty nice. First of all, I did not realize how large my hips had gotten, so I'm very glad that I cut it out of the larger size, just because, you know, I have maybe 2.5 inches of ease there, but I wish I had a little more, but I can make this work. It's starting to rain, so I have to hurry up. The other thing is, I'm glad that this is a fairly busy print, because even though I do have a little bit of ease, okay, even though I do have a little bit of ease, and the amount of ease I actually have is kind of what the pattern intended, so it's fairly tight but not clingy. Having a busy print does a great job to camouflage any little thing that, you know, might want to make an indent or something like that. But I like it. I think that, you know, it went together super fast. I really, really like this technique for hemming. I think it speeds everything up and it gives a really nice, more easy to drape and finished edge. So Anyway, I hope you got something out of it. I like it. It's very comfortable and stretchy. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Living my bucolic life, free of big city strife. Horses, chicks, and dogs, they are my neighbors. I cook and some spin, and will the horses into the barn, and time to move them out again. Red parsley pastures, beautiful pie houses, the view I see each day when I arise. This life pleases me, as it is plain to see. I'm living my bucolic life.